Hello, welcome to the Astroflower Masterclass. We're going to be going into the rhythms of life. So basically your life, the rhythms that make up a human life, but we're also going to be connecting to the rhythms of the sun, of the galaxy, and also how it affects society globally. And then also we're going to be talking about your individual rhythms, how we induce certain rhythms within our lives, which some are pretty easy to see, others are not so easy to see. And they're the overlying or overlaying layers that layers of rhythms that sort of affect our everyday rhythm. So let's get straight into the human rhythm. It's basically there is 6 rhythms in total. But within those 6 rhythms, then you get to repeating 6 rhythms after that. The first rhythm is the 9-month, the gestation period. So there's 9 months before birth and there's 9 months after birth. This actually ties in beautifully to the year rather than 9 months. What I've noticed, and I noticed this very early on in my healing, sort of 25 years ago, the accidents, people tend to do accidents and have health issues and stuff like that, usually in the last sort of 3 months before their birthday. And this brought me onto that notion of rhythms, that things kept coming back in life. And those 3 months before the birthday, I've called them autumn. So I'm equating it to a year. And this is this universal rhythm that we find in everything. We've got those 4 seasons of the year of the earth. You could also break it down into a day, where your autumn period is that moment for sleep from between 12 midnight and 6 in the morning. And then your winter period, which is where you're doing your root activity of the day, goes from 6 a.m. through to midday. And then from midday through to 6, which is your springtime. This is when you really start moving on with the things that you've been doing in the day. And then 6 to 12 is like it's like the summer period, where you enjoy the fruits of your labor of the day. So you can equate this in short periods of time, but also in long periods of time. And this is according to the planet of where we live. So in the human rhythm, within our first rhythm, we've got this 9-month rhythm, and it steps up progressively, the energy, and things tend to build up from your birthday over a 9-month period. And then in that 3-month period before your birthday, that's when your energy drops off. You can see that in a basic rhythm here, where you can where it steps up, and drops off, and we can see it according to the rhythms of the earth. Now, the ley lines, or the energy rhythms of the earth, the basic rhythms of the earth, when it's not getting any interference from the outside world, such as the sun, has these 4 seasons, and the same thing happens within energy, within the rhythm of the earth. On the 21st of December, or around that period, there you have the winter solstice, and the earth vibrations. If you're dowsing a line, and let's just say your line is 12 paces wide, on the 21st of December, it's going to go up to 24 paces. And then it's going to, then on the 21st of March, it's going to go up to 36 paces. And then from the 21st of June, it's going to go up to 48 paces. And then from the 21st of September, it drops right back down to 12 again. And this is a similar sort of thing that happens within the humans. The first 9 months, this is the first rhythm. That's rhythm number 1, the 9-month period. And this is all about, it's the moment of choice. Basically, it's the moment when a baby sort of understands the idea of color, temperature, odor, taste, shape, sound, texture, the 7 wonders of the world, as I like to call them. And that's the real moment that we make the choices in our lives. It is the moment we decide what colors we like, what sounds we like, what shapes, what textures, what tastes. those sort of things, and what sort of smells, those sort of things really come up through our life and become what is I call sort of like signposts of your evident path, basically. And we'll go into that later on when we start doing the overlays of the human rhythms. So this is in the first month here. A baby will, first things first, it doesn't really focus upon you simply because a baby's actually concentrating on your auras than anything else. I'm convinced that babies see auras like I see auras, and I look at people and I look at people's auras in the similar sort of way. I'm like a baby of 9 months when I'm looking at people's auras. It's quite fun. So yeah, you've got this 9-month period where we sort of put in the foundations of our pleasures, because everything is made up of the 7 wonders of the world. I'll do another masterclass on those 7 wonders. It's very, very particular. I'm going to do a meditation, tea meditation special on this channel at some point. So that's the first 9 months. So that's the beginning, the essentials, or the building blocks, what create everything in our life after that. Then we go from 9 months to 18 months. Now this is where the child starts moving. It starts getting physical independence. So that's walking and so forth. It's also the vague, or the starting of speaking in a certain way. I wouldn't say speaking as in stringing sentences together, but actually getting their ideas around communication. And this is where they actually can come a little bit out of their shell, and it's the movement, it's the physical independent year, which goes from 0 to 18 months, as it were. It's that sort of 9-month period after that first 9 months. Now, because you've got 1.5 years in that rhythm there, it's not so affected by like within the year, like the seasons. It's slightly different because the 9 month is shorter, and within the year, it sort of has that sort of seasonal effect upon it. So up to 18 months, we have the physical independence, discovering one's boundaries. And then we go from 18 months to 3 years. Now, 18 months to 3 years, we've all heard of the terrible twosons, the terrible twos, where, as children, we start to learn that we can actually say no. We don't have to physically say no. We can actually verbally say no. And define our limits emotionally, I would say, in a certain degree, but it's also within our own sort of position of where we find ourselves in life. So then you have for the 18 months to the 36 months, that's that period there where a child can affirm themselves in the world. That's what we tend to do. And then we go from 3 months to 6 months. Now, this is where the idea of politics comes into play in a way. The idea of lending something to someone and receiving it back, and also them lending it to you. It's that sharing, it's that compromise, it's that whole aspect there that we learned between the ages of 3 and 6 in our lives. So that's that growing up within the group. It's connecting with friends. It's having friends that they recognize that they can see more and more, and social grouping. This is what comes out between 3 and 6 years old. And then we move from 6 to 9. And this is where I suppose the political side becomes 6 to 12, sorry. And this is where the political angle comes out a lot more. It's like the Lord of the Flies in a way, sort of scenario where the weight that you can give in your actions, or your favor of someone and disfavor of another as a child, has repercussions on the people that are around us. So this is that sort of very much that political sort of stage of a human life. where we sort of take on our position and we start realizing our weight or our personality, and how we impose our personality upon the world that is around us. And then we have from the 12 to 24. Now, obviously, within these rhythms here, now we start getting into bigger rhythms here. These rhythms do repeat every year. So obviously, the 18-month repeats twice within the 3-year period. And it's some period that it's going to be much more positive, and other periods that it's going to be much more sort of, I wouldn't say negative, but not so present within your rhythms. And then we have the same sort of thing with the 6-month period, where we have a 6-year period where we have like 12 rhythms of 18 months, and we have 2 rhythms of 3 years. And when they start crossing over, this is how we start to read it, and we can start reading and seeing those crossover points. The next rhythm that we're going to be talking about is the 12 to 24. Now, what happens at 12 years old is this is where there's a fundamental change at this point. This is halfway through those 6 rhythms that I've been saying, that the essential part of life. And at 12 years old, it's the moment where females ovulate and males' testicles just, drop. So in theory, from 12 years old, and I say this to every sort of parent as well, from 12 years old, you can no longer say yes or no to your child. What you can do is you can say, look, if it was me, I would do it like this, but it's not me, it's you who's got to do it. And so you encourage within your child the independence of thinking, reflection, and reasoning, in order to get to what they so desire in life. It's also the end of that 5th rhythm, that magical, that pentagram sort of energy as well. And there is a change within the energy structure of the human at that given point. At that point there's our sacrum chakra changes form. And it becomes a lot more sort of prominent, as it were. So before the ages of 12, it's not possible for a child to have a sexual desire. This is really important. It can understand its sexual orientation, as it were, possibly. Well, just in the simple fact is if I'm a boy or a girl scenario. But from 12 years old, there is a change within the energy structure of our structures, of our chakras. Now, what this does is allows for greater depth of reflection in concerns with the energy. Therefore, we got more space within our energy. We can go much deeper within our energy. And this 12 to 24 is almost as I'd call the apprenticeship years, where we start to put all those other rhythms, those 5 rhythms, back into context. So we go through the process again, almost, where you're learning about new things. You're learning about, when you're 12, you're learning about new things about life within the first sort of period of 12 to 13. And then going from there on in, then you get your physical independence a lot more. And then you get your moral independence, your political say. When you get to around about sort of 17, 18, that's really when it starts to come into sort of into force. And then from sort of 18 through to 24 is really when it's almost like an imposition upon life, as it were, where we sort of channel our sort of apprenticeship into that point. Now, I will say there is this obviously what's been going on in regards to gender within this world at the moment, and it must be taken into context of what is going on in the energy that is around us. We're obviously getting that inversion of the energy as we go through the galactic magnetic sheet. We know this, we can start seeing this a lot more, we had aurora borealises that came down towards Reading in south of the UK, which is unusual. And this is going to be happening more and more. This was after a solar flare, it's got to be said. But these sort of things are going to be happening more and more. And basically the root is going to become the crown is going to become the root, the heart is going to become the solar plexus is going to become the heart, and so forth and so on. Now, obviously this creates an inversion in our reasoning, or certainly within the reasoning of the youth that are going through this process, who have been born basically just before the year 2000. This is going to be much more heightened, I would have thought, within that generation than within later generations, as it were. But so it's going to contribute to this idea of gender dysphoria and etc. And regards to all of that sort of side of things. The only thing I would say, as an energetic person and someone who works with energy and been seeing energy for over 30 odd years, a child is, before the age of 12, a child is not, they don't have the capacity to choose. They should be concentrating on other things, basically. They don't have the depth and the width of their chakra system in order to really understand. It's only majority, I think, are going to make choices due to influences from the outside world. And that's what seems to be happening within society as well. I guess it can only, because it doesn't concern me. I don't have this issue because I'm connected to energy. Therefore, I allow that inversion to happen without having to, appropriate it. There's a lot more sort of, feminine energy that can come out of me at any given time. And I can pick and choose, and most people can. That's the thing. That's the way it works. It's almost like an acceptance of who we are, and once we can do that, we can take on board the pole shift without it really affecting us. For this generation that's been growing up just before year 2000, it's complicated. It's difficult. It's not easy, and they need helping hands and stuff like that in order to get through all of this sort of effect, this magnetic effect that it's proposing on us as individuals, and also us as the collective. So that's around that 12-year period when we become 12 years. That's when all of a sudden the testosterone levels increase, the estrogen levels increase within a male or female, and then we get to a stage where the imposing sort of physical imposing upon the world around us, through aggression and etc., through young males, it sort of happens. And we see this throughout nature. And nature itself has rhythmical sort of values according to the world that is around us. They have gestation periods, but they also have mating periods and stuff like that, which I'm convinced humans do as well. But it's because I think the majority of births is between September and December. And that's pretty much a good idea if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. I would have thought it's going to be different on the Southern Hemisphere, more of a case of, April, May, June. April, May, June. So basically that's when the harvest sort of happens. So then therefore there's more abundance, and, the colder nights of the winter helps to produce children, as we might well say. We've got this animal rhythm that is within us, and to ignore it, to not recognize it, is is not a good idea. So we have these apprenticeship years, which goes between 12 years and 24 years. These is understanding all those other 6 rhythms, as I said, putting together within a concept of our new chakra system, which is a full-on chakra system within us. which so then therefore we can have depth and courage, as it were. Just to sort of give you a story about, I was driving one of my sons around, and he must have only been about 10 at the time. He was with one of his friends, and one of his friends commented on a young lady. It wasn't a young girl, it was a young lady walking along the street, of how, beautiful she looked, as it were. But it was very sexualized. So I pulled the car over, and my son just kind of went, "What are you on about?" He didn't get it. So I pulled over, and I kind of just inquired and sort of said, "What made you think of that?" Because I knew his chakras weren't in place in order to sort of actually have those sort of desires. And it came from the influence from outside of him, from sort of family or friends or parents or the people that are around him, basically. And it's just repeating what he's heard. And I think there's a lot of that in the world. So we have to take a lot of stuff with a bit of salt, as it were, just to sort of say. So then we get to 24 years old. Now that's what those is the apprenticeship years, the 0 through to 24. And karma doesn't seem to affect children in the similar sort of way, because they're on a learning curve. Simply because children have to experiment to learn. And we often learn through getting things wrong. So there is this sort of like a moratorium on karmic sort of feedback on children before the age of 24. It doesn't really work, because you can't really punish, I wouldn't say punish, but you can't have a karmic direction on a child who's just trying to learn. It's like, it's just not possible. That's not how karma really works. Karma's a very constructive thing rather than a punishing thing, I would say. And so for the first 24 years, you don't get this karmic effect. The karma really kicks in from when you are 24. And this is when we start really thinking about our job, our family, our home, our position in life, our career, our activities, our pleasures, our friends, and etc., and nurturing all of those sort of things. From 24, that's when we start playing for real. Yeah. And what I would call the creation years. We spend from 24 to 48 going through our creation years, and we create our whole persona, our wealth. We buy houses, etc., within that period there in our career path. And there's ups and downs, and there's certain points in that 24 to 48 rhythms that are quite important. For example, 33. Now, 33 years old, this seems to be a fulcrum moment. It's only 9 years after the start of the rhythms in the 24, and there's not a 9-year rhythm per se, but there is this sort of fulcrum moment at the age of 33 where things seem to crystallize from that moment. It's a moment where this is where the career path really, really starts kicking in. By that stage, the majority of people would have had children by that stage, and therefore the creation of the family is also taking into consideration. Then we start building insecurities for that family, for our job, for our own personal securities, and etc. And that seems to be a pivotal sort of moment. We'll go into that in more detail in our own personal rhythms of life in a third video that I will be doing in this series. And it seems to be a very pivotal point. So we get this sort of creation energy that goes right up to the age of 48. Now, if you ask most sort of females, you're going to understand that from the age of 48, you have this, you have the menopause that starts kicking in. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's it. Your gestation period finishes at 48, and it could be for some of you. But menopause takes a very long time. It takes approximately around about 9 years. There's 3 years before the menopause really kicks in, where you don't really feel it. And then there's 3 years where you can feel it full on, And then there's 3 years where it starts waning out of you. It does empower females incredibly, the menopause, because after the menopause, there's a certain degree of sense of freedom, as far as I can gather, because obviously I'm a male. But from what I've gathered from observing my healings over the last sort of 30 years, this is what it appears to be. Females tend to have a lot more energy after that, simply because they're not gestating then every month, and therefore losing sort of iron and etc. They've got a lot more energy, a lot more tonic, really, from the age of sort of just past the age of 50. There is obviously complications that come into health complications that come with this period here, which I go into. A lot of thyroid problems that go into this period here, and hormonal sort of situations as well, because there is a change in hormones as much as there is a change during that period of when we are 12 years old. That's when the hormones really kick in. It's like an inverse to the menopause. Now, males do get this as well, and it's called the entrepause. And for males, it's a different kettle of fish. It's more of trying to prove their virality. I don't know if that's the word in English. It certainly is in French. And it's that whole idea that they buy a sports car and etc. A midlife crisis, as some people would say as well, which comes around about this period here. And there is a definite change in our energy. There's a change in the way we perceive the world from 48 years old. And we move into a stage of between 48 and 72, which I call wisdom years. Now, these wisdom years is a case of this is what I understood in my first 24 years. This is what I created out of that understanding, and this is the result. Okay, so I can pass on wisdom to my kids and possibly to my grandchildren in the future, where I can say, well, I understood this, and this is what I did, and this is the result. Maybe I should have understood this, and I should have done that, and that would have been the result. But I didn't. And I don't have the same vibration within me, because my chakras are much more relaxed after the age of 48. I don't have that drive, that same drive that someone before 48 does, because my testosterone levels in me as a person, my testosterone levels drop slightly, and we don't have that killer instinct, they might say, for business and etc. So don't ask me to rebuild my life from 48, although sometimes we all know we do it. But it's more a case of, you can pick apart my life, take whatever serves you, and that helps you out. And that's that wisdom that we're passing from one generation to another. There is also this reflection, which we see most certainly within females, much more within females than males, because, well, we see it because it's much more extrovertly done than within males. Males are pretty bad at communicating sometimes, and they tend to keep things to themselves a lot more. But what happens here is the amount of times I've seen people between the ages of 48 and 52, 54, just sitting there kind of saying, who am I? What am I in life? What do I like? What am I supposed to be doing in life? Feeling over the hill sort of scenario. And then we sort of do revisit our childhood at this point to sort of saying, do you know what? I should have liked painting when I was a kid. And then people start activities what they used to do when they were a kid. A bit like, like that midlife crisis scenario of, of a man buying a sports car or something like that. We tend to open up things within our life that, because the world around us quelled our passion and desire for certain aspects of life, because we were concerned about career paths and sort of security, family, houses, that sort of thing. And it gets revisited, and this changes here tends to be can be very detrimental to relationships in particular, and that's when often the children are grown up and the relationships can realize that actually we don't correspond to each other anymore. It happens all the time. That tends to be that moment there of 48 and 48 going to 72. And then from 72, we have another rhythm which goes from 72 through to 96. Basically, I call it the freedom years. You can do what you like, basically. You return to that idea that there's no more real karma action upon you in a way. You might be able to redeem yourself as if you're looking for redemption in that sort of sense. But between 72 and 96, it's much more sort of a case of doing what you like without having any repercussions upon yourself. It's almost as if if you've made it that far, then do what you like, from 72 to 96 is basically what I call is the freedom years. You're, in theory, freed up from any notion of responsibility in a way, in regards to a lot of things outside of life. Now, these rhythms here can be affected in a multitude of different ways. They can be affected by traumas that we've had as a child, which is then going to affect that rhythm as it repeats in us constantly. And we can see this in individual readings when I do a reading for somebody. It can affect your sort of your drive, your determination, or your social interaction, or your relationship as a one-to-one, as it were. There's many things that it can affect, and it depends when it happens and how it reproduces within your life. There is also overlaying rhythms, which I'm talking about, which is rhythms that we take from usually from our family, from our parents, but also from society itself, that we integrate within our rhythms as well. So we get our natural rhythms, which is those 6 rhythms there, and then we get overriding rhythms. And then once we start getting these crossing points, that's when we can really start seeing and predicting certain aspects, general prediction, predicting aspects as you're going forward, and what is good or time to do certain things in your life. Then we also have the effect of the solar rhythms that are on us, which then affects the collective rhythm as well. Say like fads like the punk era, or the hippie era, or the rock and roll era, or the jazz era, or the electrical 80s rave era. So you have these eras that sort of go through society, and that's basically that's based upon the solar rhythms, which is a different rhythm, which is a rhythm of 11 years, approximately 10.56 to be precise. It can sometimes be only 9 years, but then it sometimes can be like 13 years. So, but on an average, that's what it comes out to. And we're going to go into, and I did go into the rhythm of the sun and how it affects us through its energies. And you can see that also in our masterclass here. So the next part 2 of this series here is all to do with those solar rhythms, the collective, and how that collective is created over the years. Obviously, all this information and so much more you can find in your book, which is linked in the description below. I will see you for your weekly readings, but also I will see you for part 2 and part 3 in this Astroflower masterclass on rhythms. In the meantime, don't forget, life should be fun, so please do enjoy.